Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chapter 3 Karma Yoga. Arjuna Uvacha Jayasi Chet Karmanaste Mata Buddhir Janardana Satkim Karmani Ghore Mamya Yojasi Keshava.
Arjuna said, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare? If you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work.
Verse 2. Vyamishreneva vakyena buddhim mohayasiva me tadekam vada nisyatya yena sreyohamapnuyam.
My intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me.
Text 3. Sri Bhagavanu uvacha loke asmin dvividha nishta pura prokta maya naga jnana yogena sankyanam karma yogena yoginam.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical, philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service.
Text 4. Na karmana manarambhan naishkarmyam purushoshnute na cha sanyasana deva siddhim samadhigachyati.
Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection.
Text 5. Nahi kaschit chanamapi jatu tishtatya karma krit karyate hyavashah karma sarvah prakriti jair gunai.
Everyone is supposed to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment.
Text 6. Karmendriyani samyamya ya aste manasa smaran indriyarthan vimodhatma mityacharah sauchyate.
One who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender.
Text 7. Yastindriyani manasa niyamyarabhaterjuna karmendriyai karma yogam asaktah savishishyate.
On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga in Krishna consciousness without attachment, he is by far superior.
Text 8. Niyatam kuru karmatvam karma jyayo hya karmanaha sharira yatrapi akjatena prasiddheda karmanaha.
Perform your prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work.
Text 9. Yajnarthat karmanyonyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha tadartam karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara.
Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondages in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain free from bondage.
Text 10. Sahayajnaha prajaha srishtva purovacha prajapatihi anena prasavishyadvam esha votvishta kamadu.
In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this yagna, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation."
Text 11. Devan bhavayatanena te deva bhavayantu vaha parasparam bhavayantaha sreyaha paramavakshata.
The demigods, being pleased by sacrifices, will also please you. And thus, by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all.
Text 12. Ishtan bhogan hivo deva dasyante yajna bhavitaha tadaistana pradayebhyo yo bhunjestena eva saha.
In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigod, being satisfied by the performance of yagna, will supply all necessities to you. But he who enjoys such gifts without offering them to demigods in return is certainly a thief.
Text 13. Yajnasista shinaha santo muchyante sarva kilvishay Vunjate te svagam papa ye pachantyatma karanat.
The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sin because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin.
Text 14. Annad bhavanti bhutani parjanyan anna sambhavaha yajnad bhavati parjanyo yajnaha karma samudbhavaha.
All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yagna, and yagna is born of prescribed duties.
Text 15. Karma brahmodbhavam vitti brahmakshara samudbhavam tasmat sarvagatam brahma nityam yajne pratishtitam.
Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice.
Text 16. Evam pravartitam chakram nanuvartayati hayah aghayu indriya ramo mogham partha sajivati.
My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain.
Text 17. Yastvatmaratireva syadatma triptasya manavaha atmaneva cha santushta tasya karyam na vidyate.
But for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, and who is satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for him there is no duty.
Text 18. नैव तस्य कृतेनार्तो न कृतेनेह कश्चन न चास्य सर्वभूतेषु कश्चिदर्थव्यपाश्रयः.
A self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being.
Text 19. तस्मादासक्तः सततं कार्यं कर्म समाचर आसक्तो ह्याचरन् कर्म परमाप्नोति पुरुषः.
Therefore, without being attached to the fruit of activities, one should act as a matter of duty. For by working without attachment, one attains the supreme.
Text 20. कर्मणैव हि संसिद्धि मास्तिता जनकादयः लोकसङ्ग्रहमेवापि संशयन् कर्ममर्हसि.
Kings such as Janka attained perfection solely by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work.
Text 21. यद्यथाचरति श्रेष्ठा तत्तदेवेतरो जनः स यत्प्रमाणं कुरुते लोकस्तदनुवर्तते.
Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues.
Text 22. नमे पार्थास्ति कर्तव्यं त्रिषु लोकेषु किञ्चन नानवाप्तमवाप्तव्यं वर्त एव च कर्मणि.
O son of Pratha, there is no work prescribed for me within all the three planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything. And yet I am engaged in prescribed duties.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Please forgive me for any mistake.
Thank you, Prabhavati. That's very nice Sanskrit recitation. And Gita Mataji, I like the way you say the translation. It's emphasized and pause. It really comes out nicely. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So welcome, dear devotees, to today's chat session. I'm not sure if anyone is joining for the first time, but if you are, a warm welcome to you. We gather every day at 7:45 to recite verses from the Bhagavad Gita, and then we focus on one verse in particular. Currently, we are reading chapter 3 entitled Karma Yoga, and today we shall discuss text number 8 in more detail. So let me share my screen. So before we do so, we always chant the Mangala Charanam prayers to invoke auspiciousness. So please, you can join me behind muted mics also. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmalitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutan Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pradhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivashadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastacha Dishatarine Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Text number 8. Niyatam Kuru Karma Tvam Karma Jayohi Akarmanaha Shariraryatrapi Chate Na Prasid Yed Akarmanaha. Word for word translations. Niyatam, prescribed. Kuru, do. Karma, duties. Tvam, you. Karma, work. Jayaha, better. He, certainly. Akarmanaha, than no work. Sharira, bodily. Yatra, maintenance. Api, even. Cha, also. Te, yo. Na, never. Prasid, yet. Is affected. Akarmanaha, without work. Translation. Perform your prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. There are many pseudo-meditators who misrepresent themselves as belonging to high parentage and great professional men who falsely pose that they have sacrificed everything for the sake of advancement in spiritual life. Lord Krishna did not want Arjuna to become a pretender. Rather, the Lord desired that Arjuna perform his prescribed duties as set forth for Kshatriyas. Arjuna was a householder and a military general, and it was better for him to remain as such and perform his religious duties as prescribed for the householder Kshatriya. Such activities gradually cleanse the heart of a mundane man and free him from material contamination. So-called renunciation for the purpose of maintenance is never approved by the Lord, nor by any religious scripture. After all, one has to maintain one's body and soul together by some work. Work should not be given up capriciously without purification of materialistic propensities. Anyone who is in the material world is certainly possessed of the impure propensity for lording it over the material nature, or in other words, for sense gratification. Such polluted propensities have to be cleared. Without doing so through prescribed duties, one should never attempt to become a so-called transcendentalist, renouncing work and living at the cost of others. So the verse again. Perform your prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. So the Lord has been going through at length, explaining from different angles of vision how one should act. And, repeatedly, the message that the Lord is giving is the same. Do not stop action. Do not give up prescribed duties. Do not give up work if one isn't sufficiently purified. Why? Because if one does so, it will be artificial. And when one does acts artificially, then there's trouble in society. There is trouble in the world, both for ourselves and for others. And, we don't have to be convinced of this. We've seen it in the past, and we're seeing it currently, and we will see it in the future. How people who take to renunciation prematurely, they get into trouble, and they cause trouble for others. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about two types of pretenders. So he gives two examples of pretenders. And which two types is that? The Suda meditators who represent themselves as belonging to a high parentage. And secondly, professional men who falsely propose that they have sacrificed everything for the sake of advancement in spiritual life. So the Suda meditators, Prabhupada says they belong to high parentage, meaning like, some of the yogis or the great meditators and rishis, they also had children. So if the father was a meditator and a rishi, sometimes they also pose to be as rishis, to be one who is very good in meditation. Actually, in that class, we can even classify the modern people who teach meditation. Because, they teach meditation, but in their own practical lives, you see that their lifestyles are not aligned with who a true meditator should be. So Prabhupada calls them Suda meditators. And the second one is great professional men who falsely propose that they have sacrificed everything for the sake of advancement in spiritual life. Actually, even if you go to Vrindavan, you see that. There are some men, early in the morning, they'll take their normal clothes out, they'll don saffron robes, they'll stand outside of temples, and they'll beg. Or sometimes they pretend to be greatly advanced persons. They give speeches, they may get disciples, but most of the time it is simply a pretense. It is all external. So Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, yes, in one sense, indirectly, you can leave the battlefield, you can go to the forest, you can renounce the kingdom, but you will simply become a pretender. Why? Because that is not Arjuna's nature. And we know, how do we acquire a particular type of nature? due to the influence of the modes of nature. And secondly, if one is not sufficiently purified, a meditator is meant to sit in a certain position and focus his mind completely on the spiritual. If one is not sufficiently purified, that is an impossible task. So rather, one carries on working, one purifies one's heart, and once one's heart is sufficiently purified, then one can either stay in one's own position or one can take a renounced position. So the main process or the main aspect of spiritual life is to purify our heart. Krishna is not advocating just do your duty. Therefore, very interestingly, Srila Prabhupada translates karma yoga as action in Krishna consciousness. That means one should do one's duty while at the same time performing Krishna consciousness or dedicating the results of one's activity to Krishna. It simply does, what is being recommended here is not only to perform prescribed duties. One can be the best householder, one can be the best brahmana, one can be the best kshatriya, or any of the 4 varna and ashram, unless at the same time one acts in Krishna consciousness, that purification will not come. It will not come. Krishna consciousness has to be there, and in particular, the aspect of hearing from the great devotees of the Lord has to be there. So this, in essence, is a very simple instruction, that one should not give up one's duty, one should stay in one's position, one should purify one's heart, and then one gradually becomes renounced. And renunciation is not an external, thing about just giving up. Renunciation is a state of consciousness, it's a state of one's heart. In the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, yesterday we spoke about Raghunath Das Goswami. Raghunath Das Goswami was a very wealthy. Yes, he wasn't a very advanced devotee, but at one stage he was he was a son of a very wealthy person. And after many attempts, he succeeded in escaping from his home, and his parents realized, he had all the wealth. He was married to a beautiful young wife. And his father said eventually, if this can't capture my son and keep him at home, nothing will. So he let him go. And when Raghunath Das, he left his father, he went to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri. And firstly, his father used to send money for him. So every few days he would prepare a big feast for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and he would feed Mahaprabhu. Then he thought to himself, what is this? I've taken to the renounced order of life, but still I am accepting wealth from my father and I'm carrying on. So one day he decided to stop accepting money from his father. With the net result, he was not inviting Mahaprabhu for a nice prashadam every day. So one day Mahaprabhu asked, what happened? Why isn't Raghunath Das inviting me anymore for prashad? Then someone told Mahaprabhu that Raghunath Das has considered that he's not a very good position. He's a renunciant but still he's accepting money. And Prabhupada talks about this in the purport. One is in a renounced position, but still one is, basically accepting from others. So when Mahaprabhu heard this, he was very pleased. So what did Raghunath Das do? How did he maintain himself? So every day he would stand at the Sima Dwara. This is the gates outside Lord Jagannath's temple. And every day people would go to see Lord Jagannath, and Lord Jagannath is fed loads of prashadam. So when you go to Jagannath temple, you would buy, someone normally buys different types of offerings to Lord Jagannath, and then one takes it. So he would stand there and people would give him some of the Mahaprashadam that they had. And he was doing this. And news went to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that this is where Raghunath Das is, and that's what he's doing. He simply begs every day. And Mahaprabhu smiled. Then after some time, Mahaprabhu noticed that Raghunath Das, he would not stand outside the temple anymore. Where was he? So he inquired, where is Raghunath Das? Then someone gave Mahaprabhu the news. That Raghunath Das, he said he considers himself just like a prostitute, simply waiting every day for someone to give him. And he didn't consider that very, very good for a renunciate. So he stopped begging. So Mahaprabhu said, how does he eat? Then they said, there is a place where people throw some remnants of Lord Jagannath Mahaprashadam that has gone a bit bad. So Raghunath goes to that place, he takes some of the rice, he washes it, and then he eats it. So Mahaprabhu decided to go see Raghunath Das. And one day Raghunath Das was eating that rice which he would get from the place where the Mahaprashadam was being thrown. He would wash it. And Mahaprabhu said, what are you eating, Raghunath Das? Let me see what you're eating. And Raghunath Das was hiding. He said, no, you can't see, you can't see. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu forcefully, he opened his hand and he took some of the rice and he tasted. And he said, this is like nectar. So from this example, we see from Raghunath Das Goswami that renunciation comes with purification. And one should not, in one sense, falsely renounce. The ultimate stage of renunciation is complete dependence on Krishna. Like, the great Vaishnavacharyas, like the example of Madhavendra Puri. They would not even cook. They would not even eat. They were simply dependent on Krishna. Krishna is my maintainer. Krishna is my protector. And if Krishna sends them some prasad, they would accept gladly. That is the mercy of Lord Krishna. And if Krishna didn't send anything, they would just accept that. And they would simply say we are dependent on Krishna. But that is a very advanced stage. Those souls are completely pure at heart. They are completely surrendered to Krishna. They are completely dependent on Krishna. And such souls, they are said to be on the real platform of renunciation. Not one who simply gives up home, one who simply gives up work. So this is the whole idea of this chapter, Karma Yoga. It is to purify our heart of all the unwanted things. And what is the main purification we have to do and make? The main purification is the consciousness that I am the controller, I am the enjoyer. Unless we have gone beyond the stage, no one should renounce work. One should continue to work. And we'll see later on, Lord Krishna explains that sometimes people who are even completely pure, they will also work simply to set an example. So this is the essence of this verse. This is the essence of the instruction that Lord Krishna is giving Arjuna. It's very relevant to us. We should never falsely renounce. We should never falsely give up our duties because of frustration, because of wanting to make a show. Better to stay where we are and purify our consciousness. This is called anartha nivritti, getting rid of the unwanted things in one's heart. But it's not a matter of just giving up and carry on working. No. One has to execute Krishna consciousness at the same time, hearing and chanting. Actually, Srila Prabhupada, he saw the situation in the world as an emergency. He needed to spread Krishna consciousness in a very short space of time. So he gave many young men sannyas. And he had instructed them to preach. And many of them did extraordinary service in preaching. But a lot of them could not maintain the sannyas ashram. They got married again, and you know, Prabhupada didn't take it very seriously in one sense. Prabhupada was always depending on Krishna. If they were always totally surrendered, they always followed the process of Krishna consciousness very seriously, they would remain safe. But many of them, they couldn't do that. So Prabhupada said, therefore, his focus changed to implement Varnashram in society. And that's what Varnashram means. Engage in your duty in Krishna consciousness, and gradually you become purified. And Prabhupada wanted this to take place throughout the world. So I'll stop here. I'll take any questions and reflections anyone may have. I didn't have much time to prepare any slides for today, so I do apologize. We're in the middle of the Bhadra campaign, and it's so busy with so many services. Any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Venkat Prabhu.
Thank you for nice classes. I just missed in the beginning where you were saying like two types of pretenders.
Yes.
Can you please explain once again, Prabhu? I didn't get it. Thank you.
Okay, Prabhupada, let me just go back to the purport and I'll show you. So Prabhupada says, there are many pseudo-meditators who misrepresent themselves as belonging to high parentage. So that's the first class. They misrepresent themselves belonging to a high parentage. And they are great professional men who falsely pose that they have sacrificed everything for the sake of advancement in spiritual life. So the second one Prabhupada is mentioning is professional men. And I gave an example of people, they like professional, you get professional footballers, you get professional actors. You also get some people who are professional meditators or sadhus. They become expert at making an external show of being a sadhu, but internally they are not sufficiently purified, and they cause trouble for themselves and others. That's the second class. And the first one, the first one is, you know, there is a great rishis we know in the past. Many of these rishis, they were married and they had children, siblings. So they, these person, they misrepresent themselves as belonging to high parentage. You know, like sometimes even you get the caste Goswamis, you know, the caste Brahmanas. And Prabhupada says, you are Brahmana or you are sannyas by qualification, not by birth. So they feel that by birth, you know, they can pose themselves in a certain way. So these are the Sudha meditators that Prabhupada is talking about. Does that make sense to you,
Yeah.
Venkat Prabhu?
Thank you, Prabhuji. I think you might have answered this next question, but sorry if I ask again.
Yeah, sure.
I think this prescribed duties comes from Varna. So I know in Kali Yuga, all the people born with Sudra Varna. So can I consider myself in the beginning, I'm Sudra and try to do my prescribed duties as a Sudra, even though whatever the Varna I born in, not considering that, considering as a Sudra, doing my duties as per Sudra, and then try to maybe upgrade. Is that the right approach, Prabhuji?
Yes, yes. Yeah, if one is born and one is inclined to a certain type of work, we should just carry on doing that work, but execute Krishna consciousness. This morning I was reading a nice lecture by Sridhar Swami. And he was saying that how in Pakistan, when he went to preach, the people he preached to were the toilet cleaners. I think they're called bangis. And he said he preached to these toilet cleaners and they took to Krishna consciousness. And they used to carry on doing their duties as toilet cleaners without any shame, but they were starting to practice Krishna consciousness. So ultimately, one should not identify according to a certain varna or ashrama. It is said in Kali Yuga, Kalo Sambhava, Kalo Shudra Sambhava. That means everybody in Kali Yuga is born Shudra, meaning everyone is born with the mentality and the consciousness of Shudra, practically everyone. So what we should do is we have been given a certain type of work due to our karma. We should never feel frustrated with that work. We should continue doing that work in Krishna consciousness and then advance till the point where we even become free from considering ourselves of a particular type of work. One's heart becomes completely purified, and then one is a Vaishnava. One is a Vaishnava. And a Vaishnava, he doesn't consider himself to be in any Varna or any ashram. What does the Vaishnava consider himself to be? Dasa, dasa, anudasa. I am simply the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant. Now, someone may challenge to say, what you've just said is not very enterprising, because it means, you're basically propagating everyone stays in a situation of poverty or not. That's actually not what Bhagavad Gita is prescribing. Krishna will later say, rather you do your own duty than to accept someone else's duty and do it imperfectly. So sometimes you see today in Kali Yuga, it is so topsy-turvy. Simply for the sake of money, people will take on a profession. They'll become a banker because the bankers get a lot of money. But they become very, very miserable as a banker. And they jump off tall buildings and they commit suicide. So many times it has happened. this has happened. Rather, you accept your own position according to your nature and you act. So I've taken a long time to answer your question, Venkat Prabhu. But the essence of the answer is, yes, whatever your position is in life, just carry on working in Krishna consciousness, focused on hearing and chanting. Don't necessarily consider yourself to be a Shudra, because that is an Upadhi, or a Brahmana, or a Kshatriya. Just think you are the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, and gradually execute devotional service, and we will become completely purified.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Let me see if there's any questions on the chat box.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranams.
Dandavat Pranam.
I have another question. So, as you rightly said, renunciation is a verb, and it's a state of consciousness, and not a verb itself that we sacrifice everything. Just curious, we all being the beginners, starting from the very bottom of the scale of Krishna consciousness, with no taste for chanting, with no taste for serving the Lord, and then we read and listen 1,000 times that we're not just bodies and the souls. But then when we actually do our day-to-day lives and the activities, we still we are acting as our bodies but thinking that we are souls, like, you know what I mean. And how do we kind of purify ourselves at this stage yet? I mean having no taste with chanting or serving the Lord really, and are there any other ways that we can fast track this process of purifying ourselves, or something that we can on a different level, maybe personal or a philosophical level, that we can try to train our mind to develop this taste in serving the Lord, and then fast track this purification process, and gradually kind of get onto the track of developing the taste and love for the chanting and the service, and then reach that level of purification and the renunciation in this life.
Yes, we have to allow ourselves a time for the process to work. Sometimes it's not very perceptible, but if one is very attentive in one's Krishna consciousness, then it happens. It happens, and we know that Srila Rupa Goswami said that there are 5 very important. You asked the question, how can we fast track? So Srila Rupa Goswami explains that there are 5 very potent aspects of Krishna consciousness, and if we apply ourselves to those all 5 of them diligently, then it will be fast tracked. You know what those 5 are, Mataji?
Do you mean the limbs of Krishna consciousness, Prabhu, like live in the Vrindavan and...
Yeah, the 5 most potent forms, the one that Srila Rupa Goswami gives in Nectar of Devotion.
No, I'm not sure, Prabhuji.
I think you said the first one. You said the first one, so I'm sure you know the other 4.
I'm not maybe very well versed in those.
Prabhavati Mataji will tell us.
I think Nama Sankirtana, devotee association, reading Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, and listening from devotees, living in Mathura, and deity worship.
Yes, those are the 5 that Prabhavati just mentioned. Chanting the holy name, associating with devotees of Krishna, living in a holy place, worshipping the deity, and studying Srimad Bhagavatam. Do you do all of that, Mataji?
I do them, Prabhu. I've been practicing all this for a couple of years, but I still think that, kind of, it's a very wavering. Sometimes I'm very intensely into it. Sometimes I'm totally, out of it. Sometimes I do chant as if I'm like, my mouth is in a different body, and then my heart is somewhere else. And then it just feels like, it's better not to chant rather than chanting like this. But sometimes I'm like so much into it and I cry, and okay, this is hopeless. This is not how it's supposed to be. I would love to have a steady, and then a loving.
Wow, I think the fact that you can cry is a sign of really good advancement. Once Prabhupada was giving a lecture and he told the devotees, you should cry for Krishna. Then one devotee put his hand up and said, but Prabhupada, I can't cry for Krishna. And what was Prabhupada's answer? Then cry that you cannot cry. So it's slowly, and we need to develop this greed for Krishna consciousness and just be patient, because Srila Rupa Goswami says in the Nectar of Instruction that the first aspect is patience. 5 aspects favorable for devotional service. Patience. So be patient, apply yourself, and it'll happen. It'll be happen. Just be happy with whatever you're doing in Krishna consciousness. Be enthusiastic and be patient. It'll happen, surely.
And how do we get into the conceptual living of that we are souls and we are the servants of the Lord, rather than feeling that, I'm so and so, I'm so and so, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, etc. From all those into the, actually applying the principles of Krishna consciousness in our day-to-day life, day-to-day work, and day-to-day relationships and the responsibilities, Prabhu. Say, for instance, we go to a job, and then there is always this insecurity of losing a job, and there are relationships. We're always into the, force of whether are we able to deliver what we're supposed to, and can we, etc. Rather than just being, that relaxed and complete surrenderance. Okay, I will do what I can, but then it is up to them of giving me that capability of doing things. Let me surrender. How do we reach to that stage of surrenderance, complete surrenderance from anxiety levels?
You just have to remember at every moment, Mataji. I mean, for whatever it's worth, that's my experience. You just have to think at every moment, I am in a dream. This whole world is a dream. This whole experience is a dream. It's so temporary. My real position is I am a servant of Krishna. That is my real position. I am a servant of Krishna. I am a servant of my Guru Dev. And as long as Prabhupada says, simply by thinking like this, that I am servant of Krishna, you already liberated. So you have to always remember thinking, when you are interacting with your family members, you need to think, in fact, you're inviting, interacting with your husband, maybe you're getting into a little heated debate. Sometimes the modes will carry away, but we have to bring ourselves, think we are a servant of Krishna. We are servant of Krishna. And if we keep thinking like that, we won't get swept away. Yeah, we just have to think, I am servant of Krishna. I am meant to be engaging my senses. I mean, I was driving today and I was thinking about it. How not to become infected with the material consciousness. We just have to, by thinking always, who am I? I am servant of Krishna. Where am I? I'm simply in a temporary position. What is my goal? My goal is to awaken my Krishna consciousness. If you always remember your goal, we always remember our goal at every moment. What is my goal? What is my goal in life? My goal is to serve. My goal. And the other thing, Mataji, I would strongly recommend, I don't know if you do this, it is a very, very powerful way. Very powerful way. Try to become engaged in some way to spread Krishna consciousness. Take up the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada seriously. Consider what you can do for the mission, how you can do it. That is a very, very, very powerful way, to fast track our consciousness to remain surrendered and to always remain connected.
That helps, Prabhu. Excellent tips. Thank you very much.
Hare
It definitely helps. I will try.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Sorry, there were a few comments on the chat. Please bear with me. I'll just read. Okay. Ajay Prabhu writes, in the purport, what does this sentence mean? So-called renunciation for the purpose of maintenance is never approved by the Lord. Essentially, Ajay Prabhu, it means we take, say we decide to renounce home, family, job, everything, right? Prabhu is saying we have to maintain the body. The body needs to be fed. The body needs to be clothed. So you have now renounced everything. You renounced your work, you renounced your family, you renounced the world. But you still have to eat, right? You are still very much in the consciousness, I want to taste good food. I want to dress warmly. And while being in that consciousness, what you would do, you'll want to fulfill those needs. And how do you get money to fulfill those needs? You will go and beg. And how does a sadhu beg? He pretends to be a very renounced person. He makes a show of being very renounced so that the people will feel inclined to give him something. So such type of renunciation is not approved by the Lord. Where one is not truly renounced, one is still thinking. Prabhupada says, a sannyasi should never do two things. When he goes to a householder's life, think what a nice house he has. And secondly, think what a beautiful wife he has. Those two thoughts should never, ever enter the mind of a sannyas. And if one is not sufficiently purified, for sure it will happen. Let alone a sannyas, even a grihastha Vaishnav. One should never be caught in such a consciousness. So that's what it really means, Ajay Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I have another meeting in a minute's time, dear devotees. We are planning for our last week of the Bhadra campaign. I have to take your leave. I'm sorry. If you have any questions or you wanted to make a point, maybe tomorrow you can do it in tomorrow's class, or you can send me a message if you have a particular question. Thank you very much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyeva patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo. Anandakoti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Prabhuji.
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Wonderful class. Thank you.